Hello everyone, welcome to LexTalk World Talk Show presented by Clickway Creators. Today we have Mr. Ernesto de la Puente with us. He is an associate attorney with Santamarina and Steta from Mexico City. He has more than 10 years of professional experience focused on labor and employment law. Thank you so much for taking our time today. We really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me. It is an honor to participate in this platform.
Thank you so much. So before we get started, could you please tell us more about yourself?
Yes, of course. Well, I started my studies in law in 2005 in the National Autonomous University of Mexico, which is one of the most important universities in Latin America, or I think the most important one, but well, in the areas of investigation and innovation, but also in ancient professions such as law. At first, I wanted to study history, but but then in order to gain some additional greater economic goals, I thought that the salary of a professor will not be enough. I don't know about other countries, but in Mexico, the salary of professors is not that great. So I chose law, and I ended my law degree studies in 2010. And later I have other academic goals, such as an specialist degree in labor law with honors in 2012, a master degree under high academic performance in 2016, and numerous courses about negotiation skills and legal tech and labor law, etc. And for a professional point of view, my professional experience started in 2008 while I was still studying, and I became a public officer in the Federal Labor and Social Welfare Ministry in a specific administrative unit that dealt with the analysis of the constitution and operation documents of trade unions in Mexico. I felt very attracted to collective labor law. That is the one that deals with trade unions, with collective bargaining agreements, with strike notices, etc., because it has a very important historical background in Mexico. Unions of workers fought in our revolution to create the Mexican Constitution, which was the first one to include social rights in the text of the Constitution, even before Russia. So that was very appealing to me, right? I eventually became the head of the unit of trade union registration, and then I wanted to follow a different path. I wanted to learn how to litigate. So I Googled which are the 5 more important firms in Mexico, and I sent my CV. Eventually, I decided to work for Santamarina y Steta, which is one of the most important law firms in Mexico, and it has a very strong labor and employment practice. In my first years, I learned how to litigate, but then I was more attracted to, and I specialized in labor consultation, because I wanted to help national and international companies with some labor, on how to face labor issues through multiple tasks, such as due diligence, collective labor issues, social security issues, compliance with federal and local labor laws, innovation through technology applied to the world of work, etc. But well, I have been working for Santamarina y Steta for 7 years now, and I am very happy still because Santamarina y Steta, and specifically the labor and employment practice area, has been recognized as tier 1 in many national and international rankings. And in fact, I have been also recognized as an uprising leader in my field. So I am very happy. And that's about it. That's my story.
It's truly inspiring story, Ernesto. So you have seen a tremendous growth in just 12 years of span. So thank you for the brief introduction about your personal as well as your professional background. So talking about the current scenario, I would like to understand, how does your legal sector, especially in employment law and social security law, because that is your specialized area. So, what do you think? How it is impacted due to COVID-19, especially in your city, and what solutions do you envision for from your expertise?
Okay, well, that's a very interesting and complicated question.
Yeah,
But well, let me give you some context first of what's happening in Mexico, and then we'll add to the specific issues. Um, well, as you may know, the entire world has been profoundly affected by this pandemic situation of COVID-19, and of course, Mexico has not been an exception.
yes,
But due to certain governmental decisions in Mexico, and also because of carelessness of our population, um, I think we have been affected more than many countries. And I give you an example. In the first and most hard part of the quarantine of the pandemic here in Mexico, which started in March, and I mean March, uh, April, and May of 2020, we lost 12 million job positions. So that's huge. 12 million, and we're just talking about job positions. We're not talking about the person and the families that depend on those job positions. 12 million job positions were lost. And from that, 3.5 million positions pertain to the formal sector, which is the one that fulfills with labor minimum rights and grants social security. And the rest, the 8.5 million, were from the informal sector, which is the one that doesn't respect that. In October 2020, right now, we have regained 6.5 million of those job positions, but only 25% of them are from the formal sector. And we expect to lose more jobs, since we expect now a new outbreak, just as is happening in Europe and etc., that is going to hit in November and December of this year. So back to your question, what impacts do I foresee? The first one is related to this permanent loss of jobs and the continuous precariousness of work in Mexico. Because if a person from the formal sector loses his or her job and cannot regain a job in the same formal sector, eventually, in order to survive, they will get into the informal sector, where they do not have social economic benefits, such as the labor minimum rights and the access to social security. And I mean activities such as freelancers, informal vendors in public markets, food services in public markets, private transportation services such as Uber, Cabify, etc. They do not have these employment-related rights, and they do not grant social security. So it's a huge problem. What's the possible solution that I foresee? And it's going to be a big effort for companies, but also a big effort for employees, is to try to reduce costs and save job positions. Companies have to study the way they are doing business and try to reduce costs through other kind of structures. Like, for example, having people with temporary works, scaling up and scaling down industrial activities, changing work shifts, and even taking out from their main activity certain secondary activities through outsourcing, for example. And I'm not talking about the bad outsourcing, the bad outsourcing that our government tries to avoid, and the International Labor Organization is trying to avoid also. I'm not talking about the outsourcing that eludes labor and taxes. I'm talking about the real constituted companies that are specialized in secondary activities that can be hired by greater companies that can also get rid of those secondary activities, so they can focus only in their main activity. Those kinds of strategies can help companies to reduce costs and to save job positions to employees. And the second problem, the second solution that has to do with this also, is how do companies can maintain the same salary and benefits of employees with the same structure when they are facing half of the production half of the sales, etc. Right? And the solution there is social dialogue, something that the International Labour Organization has been asking to countries and companies and employees since the beginning of their creation. And I mean, since our Mexican government does not give any support to companies, then companies have to achieve agreements jointly with their employees by showing them the current situation, economic situation of the country and of the company, and ask them to enter into agreements to temporarily reduce working conditions. Just like with collective agreements in case there are trade unions, or with private individual agreements in case they're just individuals, right? And what I mean, I think it would be better to reduce first the extraordinary benefits, such as, for example, bonuses, extraordinary allowances, expenses reimbursements, etc. And then if it comes to that, then trying to reduce certain labor rights such as vacations, vacation premium, Christmas bonus, etc. But that just at the end, right?
Yeah.
However, it is very, very important for companies that do business in Mexico to know that they cannot reduce under the minimum rights stated and provided in the Mexican federal labor law, because then those agreements will be illegal. For a long time, what I'm saying, it was unthinkable in Mexico, because companies and employees always thought that when they gain a right, they cannot reduce it because it would entail a waiver of rights. But now, with this pandemic situation, we have seen that it is the only way that companies can face this critical economic situation, through social dialogue and through making agreements with their employees. And the third and fourth problem that I see, and the possible solutions, have to do with social distancing. The first one with the prohibition of attending to workplaces, to physically attend to workplaces, and the second one to the prohibition to attend to public spaces. And that one is especially important for our sector, for the legal sector, because we cannot attend physically to tribunals. But let me initiate first with the first one, right? With the prohibition of attending to workplaces. What's the solution there? We have to think about new forms of employment, such as home office. Since employees cannot attend physically to their work centers in the big conglomerates in the big cities that we have built in these past 2 centuries, we have been thrown into the future within the next 10 to 15 years, at least in Mexico, because that was what we expected, into a society where work has to be performed through technology and technology alone. And the work, and I'm talking administrative work, and the work that had to be performed in big production sites will still have to be done physically, but will be done by less workers than before, through automatization of work. We were expecting this within the next 10 to 15 years, but we are living this now because of the pandemic situation, right? So Mexico, of course, is not ready. The only provisions that we have in the Mexican federal labor law state that home office had to be conducted as a 19th century job, where a person performs their work in their home, and then they have like a finished product, and they take this finished product into the factory and deliver it to the employer. And our legislative branch only added that those provisions would be applicable to home office because now we will use technology. And that's it. That's not a change.
Yeah.
So what can we expect, and what can Mexico do in order to be ready for this? First, we have to change the Mexican federal labor law. We have to have a new legislation where we can have a new structure of home office that comprises all the problems around this kind of structure. Like, for example, a way to monitor activities during the work shifts, safety and security conditions in their homes, and the way to qualify employment-related risks in their homes, employees' rights for digital disconnection, the way of granting of tools just like computer, the ergonomical chair, even desks, for example, and who's going to pay for the light and the internet and etc. So we have to change the law. And then, secondly, we have to have a change of mentality between employees and also employers, because employers have to allow employees to have a 100% home office system if they want to, and they have to during the pandemic situation, and when this pandemic situation ends, hopefully within the next few months when we get all vaccinated, a mixed system where, for example, employees can work from their homes when they want to, or they can come into the office, a very much smaller office where they would have like a specific public space where they can dock in their computer and start working, and they can return to their homes. And with this, you can also face reduction of costs considerably, because you will stop paying those enormous leases of the enormous buildings and corporations that companies pay, right? And the second part of this change of mentality, and the second part of those four issues is the prohibition of attending to public spaces, like I was commenting before. And I'm going to talk about from my perspective as a lawyer, as a person that has to attend physically to a court, a tribunal, a board in order to litigate, right? So what can we do in order not to go there? Just a change into digitalization and online dispute resolution.
Right.
And we have done here in Mexico. I know it, for many people, it sounds like we're talking about science fiction. But in the world, of course, in the first economies, but also in Mexico, we have performed this in the administrative tribunals that we have. So it can be done, right? However, it is also difficult, and it came like a dream for me and for a lot of Mexican lawyers, because although we want these new tools to be included, and we want to include artificial intelligence to non-contentious proceedings, the reality is that we have no money to do so, right?
Yeah.
Mexico entered into a grand labor reform of its justice system in 2019. And it was planned to be performed between 2019 and 2023, right? We were going to change between a system that was controlled by the executive branch through conciliation and arbitration boards to a system that is going to be controlled by the judicial branch through courts and tribunals, right?
Yeah.
But this pandemic situation changed everything, because we had certain economic statistics from the government of how it was going to cost and etc., and budgets and etc., right? But all of this hasn't been changed, because we now need money to get the vaccine, and we need the vaccine to get everyone vaccinated and to go back again into physical attending to working spaces and etc., right? So these will slow down, although the Mexican government will implement this change within the next 4 years. In reality, this will slow down a change into technology and digitalization, etc., at least for 10 years, I believe.
I completely agree with you on these points, because you have identified all the major problems, and you have also shared your views and how we can work on these areas through all these different thoughts which you have just shared. So now coming back to the next questions, we understand there has been a major reform to the major collective labor relationship will be addressed in Mexico. So could you please share more information about that?
Yes, of course. This was part of the labor reform of 2019.
Yeah.
The first part was that this huge change into the judicial system. And the second part was a huge change also into the way we have been doing things in collective labor law for the past 100 years. This change, the main change is that now trade unions will have to prove that they have representation among the workers. And I mean, it could sound as ridiculous because this would have been thought about 100 years ago or 50 or 20 years ago. But the fact is that our system was based in good faith, I think, for the creation and the operation of trade unions. And part of the operation of the trade unions was that if they wanted to execute a collective bargaining agreement with a company, they could file a strike notice and they could close down the business if the company didn't want to celebrate this collective bargaining agreement. And after the company was closed, then the employer had the possibility to controvert that the trade union did not have the representation of their employees in order to sign that collective bargaining agreement. But how many companies do you know that can sustain a closure of 3 days, 1 week, 1 month, years? So it was a very strange system. What the employers do in Mexico? Well, they started creating a figure that has been hugely criticized among the world, which is collective bargaining agreements of protection of their work centers. There was an article in the law, there is an article in the law that states that when a company already has a collective bargaining agreement duly deposited within the Conciliation and Arbitration Board, then a trade union cannot file a strike notice to sign a new collective bargaining agreement, right? So that was the specific provision, and what employers did was to sign collective bargaining agreements with trade unions that were close to their interests, with white unions, as we call them, right? Unions that were more dedicated to pleasing the employer than the employees. And that system lasted for years. And it was a protection system against companies in order not to receive these strike notices that will end up as a way to blackmail companies, right? So we have received a lot of pressure for our commercial partners, especially from the United States, not that much from Canada, to change the system because we have labor peace through means that were not so legal, right? So the United States pressured us to approve this reform, and then we signed the new United States-Mexican-Canadian agreement that also state this kind of provision to prove representativeness of trade unions in order to sign collective bargaining agreements. And we are being watched by the United States and by the whole world. So that's about it.
Talking about legal tech, so what changes related to legal tech do you foresee in your field?
Well, the main one that I hope is going to be approved is this digitalization and online dispute resolution. And I have seen this in other parts of the world and in other branches of the law, and I'm very glad to see this in other Mexican branches of the law, like administrative and PI and etc. Right, intellectual property and etc. But I would like to see this change in labor law. Like for example, having the opportunity to litigate through this mean, through a conference, through virtual conferences that our Supreme Court have already put in place, that would be great for Mexico. And also the application of artificial intelligence, not only for judges, so they can slow the time they have to resolve certain things, like for example, non-contagious proceedings, as I was explaining before, like the designation of beneficiaries in case of death of an employee, which is non-contagious, or this process of cancellating the strike notices when there was already a collective bargaining agreement in place. Those are administrative tasks that do not need the full attention of a judge. And those tasks can be performed through artificial intelligence. And that's for the judicial branch. And for us, we can also, and we are working in Santamarina y Steta in order to perform this, we can hire those services of artificial intelligence or even create one in order to reduce the time we have, and I'm going to speak about labor consultation only, the time that we put in place in order to analyze contracts or to create individual employment agreements or to modify collective labor agreements, etc., those things can also be done by an artificial intelligence. It's going to take time because I have seen how these things work, but in a couple of weeks, maybe a month, you will have a machine that can work for you, not the substitution of the lawyer, because there are numerous things that a machine cannot do yet, right?
Yeah.
But it can help you achieve your goals in much less time. So that's what I foresee.
Completely agree with you, because AI is something which is really evolved in our day-to-day business, and especially in the legal sector. I have read somewhere that now, even if I talk about the smaller size of law firms, they are also applying artificial intelligence in their daily routine. Now, coming back to the regional law firm, because you are working with a regional law firm, so I just need to understand how you are competing with global law firms that are initiating in the legal service market, especially in your Mexico City.
Well, that's a difficult question. It is difficult to compete, and I don't want to be presumption because I do also work for a grand law firm here in Mexico. But I mean, when I hear your question, I think about the big four, right? The big four that are trying to come into the legal services and not just the accountability services, not only in Mexico but around the world, and they are trying or to buy entire law firms or to create one with big shots, right? It is going to be difficult to compete because they have the power of money and they have the resources and they have entered today into artificial intelligence, machine learning, and etc. Right? And we have not, even though that we are a grand law firm and smaller law firms, I believe the only way to compete is to become more specialized in your field. Like, for example, these big four firms are going to want to litigate and to perform labor consultation in general, right? But if you have a partner or an associate that is truly specialized and that it's a leader in the market for example, the application of these new rules of the United States Mexican Canadian Agreement, or the application of International Labor Organization conventions, that's something that you will not be getting in the general market. If you have that lawyer, that would be the only way that you will have to compete with all those great lawyers. And you have also to think about new market and new capabilities of making business. And this specific issue that we addressed in the past question about artificial intelligence and digitalization is essential for any law firm that wants to compete worldwide.
Absolutely. So now on the personal front, Ernesto, I would like to ask you, what are the three core values you truly believe in?
Well, I don't know if they can be qualified as values, but I have three guidelines in my life. The
And what are
first one
those?
is commitment or willpower. That is the ability to resist short-term temptations and challenges in order to achieve a long-term goal. The second one is discipline, which is the ability to behave in a controlled way through certain rules and standards. And the last one is teamwork, which is the ability to get yourself a group of efficient people that can work with you to achieve a specific goal. And I think by having those, a person, whatever he, she, whatever, can have the inner force to take actions, can have the perseverance to fulfill all the activities needed to achieve a goal, and can have the support of the team to achieve a goal that cannot be achieved individually. But just let me tell you about a fourth one. I know you asked for three, but this is one. This
Go
one
on,
is
go
very
on.
important. It's social responsibility. I think that it doesn't matter if you have the power, the money, the intelligence, the friends, the support, etc., to achieve a specific goal. If you do not do it for the improvement of society, of the entire mankind, then it would be a
It would be a
hollow
complete
effort,
waste. Yes,
an empty effort. Yeah.
I completely agree with you because social responsibility is something that is the most crucial part, and I think when we are talking about the major core values, I think we miss this thing. And thanks for taking that out. So thank you so much, Ernesto, for sharing such a great insight with us. And I really enjoyed the whole conversation today. And we look forward to having a chat with you again in the future. And for viewers, if you like this chat, please like and share this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, that is Clickway Creators. This is Abhishek for LexTalk World.